Good afternoon, YouTube, and welcome back to Sober Ed. I wanted to do another video, starting off with step one. We were admitted we were powerless over substance, and that our lives had become unmanageable, and it was a bitter pill for me to swallow when I came into recovery. I'm sat here today, 1,707 days sober, one day at a time, and that's all to the glory to the God of my understanding, the higher power that I was unwilling to believe in when I first got to recovery. See, I had a very atheistic view upon the world. What atheistic? I sort of meddled between atheism and just pure agnosticism, if that's even a bloody word, I don't know. But and there again, I had deep bouts of faith within everything. You know, I remember times when I were drunk, when I were in under influence of alcohol and drugs, and I'd be shaking my fist at heaven, you know, begging God to help me. Yet then when I sobered up, I'd be like, oh yeah, there's no such thing as a God, or anything like that. So I wanted to do a video today about powerlessness, the first step in recovery, and often one of the most difficult steps for people to overcome. Because I know there are a lot of agnostics out there, and I know there are a lot of atheists out there. And the wonderful thing about step one is if you are an addict, or if you are an alcoholic, or if you are an overeater, or if you have a problem with anything compulsive, then step one's going to be good for you. So I'll go back to when I was introduced to step one, my thoughts around that time, and sort of where I am today as well in terms of step one. Do you know, I mean, I'm 4.5 years sober. Do you know, step one is nailed. I have accepted. I understand why I'm powerless. It's got nothing at all to do with the amount of money in my pocket, the car I drive, the house I live in, or the family that I live with. And that was the difference when I first came in. Do you know, when I first came in and got help in recovery, I had a couple of not bad experiences. I was trying to get help. I was drinking myself and sniffing myself to death. And I'd been to my doctor and I said, I need help. I've got issue with drugs and drink and blah, blah, blah. And we spoke about the fact that I was depressed, and he said, it's probably because you're depressed, you turn into alcohol and drugs, so they put me on an antidepressant. And that seemed to not amplify everything, but I felt better for a short space of time. Thought this thing had fixed it, but it wasn't long until I were off rails again, and I were binging hard. And then after that failed attempt at getting well, I tried to stop drinking myself on a couple of other occasions, and I always manipulated my wife or my family into drinking at some point. So I got back into drinking, and then I went to see a counsellor for a little bit after a bad spree, and I started to do some online counselling stuff. But that wasn't the solution to the problem that I had. Do you know what I mean? I had a spiritual problem. There was something wrong inside me spiritually, that were not right, that needed to be rectified, and I wasn't going to get the solution to that from a doctor or from a psychologist. Funnily enough, a psychologist gave us step one, and the one that I was speaking to at the time didn't, and that's not. And I'll straight off the bat, I'll say, I'm not down talking psychologists. I'm not down talking counsellors. I'm not down talking doctors. Certain people out there might be a heavy drinker, might be a moderate drinker. They might go and get help at a doctor's and it solves the problem for them. That's fine. But if you're a real addict, if you're a real alky, chances are your problem's spiritual and you've got to get step one nailed. So when I first came in, I saw step one, and I remember thinking, well, I'm not powerless over anything, and my life is manageable. And I had this quite egotistical view upon it all. Obviously, many of us before the steps had big egos, and they all needed sort of dialing down a little bit. But I remember looking at the step and thinking, I'm not powerless over anything, and you know, I'm doing all right in life. And I was, to be fair, I had a decent income at the time when I first got sober. I had a good job, I had a nice house, I had a nice wife and children. But it wasn't until I sat down with the man that helped me, and we started to sort of go through things with a fine tooth comb, and we looked at the second part of step one, the unmanageability. And in actual fact, I did have a house, but it wasn't going to be long until it were repossessed. And I did have lights on in that house, but it wasn't going to be long until gas board and electric board switched them off. I did have a wife, but it wasn't going to be long until she went. You know, I did have a bit of money in my pocket, but it wasn't going to be long until that were gone as well. So I started to slowly open up. You know, this guy did a wonderful job of making a blind man see, basically. And I realised for the first time that there were a lot of people propping me up. You know, there were people propping me up financially. There were people propping me up emotionally. And at the time, they were doing that with the best intent, but today I'd see that as enabling, you know, and I have a completely different outlook upon that, and that's a different video all in itself. So we're going to stick to powerlessness today. So he got me to understand that my life was unmanageable. You know, if it weren't for me missus, if it weren't for lenient bosses, I suppose, if it weren't for good friendship and solid friendship, my life would have probably gone to rack and ruin a lot quicker than what it did. But it was the first part, the powerlessness. Do you know, the unmanageability? I thought, yeah, my life is unmanageable now. But it was the powerlessness. Do you know, I thought I had this deep inner drive that I could overcome any obstacle. A very egotistical person in the sense that if somebody said it couldn't be done, I'd do it. Do you know, I've always up until getting sober, and I still can be egotistical today, but I have a 12-step program to sort of pull that into check and right size it. But yeah, if you'd have asked me to run a mile, I'd have run two, and if you'd have asked me to do anything, I'd overdo it. So the powerlessness I struggled with. So we had to delve deeper into the work, and when we delved deeper into the work, I started to see that there was an insanity, there was an allergy, and there was a mental obsession. And this stuff absolutely revolutionised the way I saw addiction. Do you know, I thought powerlessness was down to something that I could assert my will to. I didn't realise that powerlessness was my actual physical makeup. And it wasn't until he explained to me that I have this mental obsession not to go out there and just get absolutely blottoed, but I have this mental obsession to control and enjoy the drink or the drug. So, and it'd always start out with a thought of, I'll just get one bag, and I'll be right then, you know, or I'll just have one bottle and I'll be okay. And off of that thought, I'd purchase, I'd consume, I'd kickstart the physical side of it inside me, you know, and in between all of that, there's a subtle insanity that I can't see the consequences of my behaviour. And we started to go on about the fact that this stuff centres in the middle of here. It centres in my mind, and that's where the problem begins. Because if I just craved alcohol once I started to drink it, all I'd have to do is stay away from it. You know, and I've had a lot of things over years, but yeah, if I I have an allergy to alcohol. Whenever I put it into my body, whenever I put drugs or drink into my body, I start to crave it. And if that were the problem, like I just said, don't put it in, there won't be a problem. But the thing is I have this mental obsession to consume it. So, and that works by, I convince myself, I lie to myself, and then I believe it. So, it'd start off, like I mentioned, we'll just have 1 or 2 cans. I'd say to myself, bloody hell, Eddie, that's a good idea. Why don't you just have 1 or 2 cans? I'd then go get the 2 cans, but there'd be nothing in there saying, don't do this, this is bad, last time this happened, something bad happened. I'd just a complete blank spot at that point. I'd buy the cans, I'd drink the cans, and then I'd start to crave it even more. So once I put any alcohol or drug into my body whatsoever, I start to crave it. Only once I've consumed it. Don't happen before, it happens when it's in my system. So that's why we always went out to have 4 or 3 or 2, or I always used to admire, or I'd look at people around me in awe and I'd think, how on earth can they just take 1 drink and stop and go back and have a cup of tea? Or I'd go to football with some lads and we'd have 5 or 6 pints while we were out, and then next minute we'd go home and they'd make a cup of tea and have a sandwich, and I'd be like, hey, we're drinking. I thought you don't stop once you've started. And I just thought I were a bingy heavy drinker, but it wasn't until I hit the shores of recovery that I realised that I have this allergy. So that's why I'm powerless. I am completely powerless over alcohol, because I have this mental obsession to control and enjoy the amount. I don't have a mental obsession just for vodka. I don't have a mental obsession just for cocaine. I have a mental obsession to control and enjoy. I want to drink like normal people. That's what I want to do. I want to go out and have just the 1 or 2. But I can't, because once I have the 1 or 2, I start the craving, I can't stop. Then I'm off on another spree and nobody knows when Eddie's coming back. So when this were explained to me, it absolutely, like I said, it revolutionised the way I saw addiction. It revolutionised the way I saw my makeup. And I didn't need to be convinced too much, because the guy that guided me through the work just said, Eddie, look at your experience. Look at what's happened in your life up to this point in respect to alcohol, to drugs. And I looked back and I saw that I could never, ever, ever go out and just have 1. My missus would say to me, we used to take our kids up to a soft play area, and she'd say, oh, can you just have 1 pint and drive back? Because I don't like to drive back from here. And I'd be like, oh no, I'd rather just not have any at all. And that's because once I'd had the 1, I knew that it had started this drive inside me to consume more. So it was easier not to bother touching anything. So from that experience, I could see that I do actually suffer with this internal allergy, with this problem that once I put 1 in, I can't stop. Do you know? And that's where the old saying comes from, that 1's too much and 1,000's not enough. It's what got me into the most bother. So once I accepted that the issue centres in the middle of my mind, it's nothing to do with the amount I drink, it's to do with what I'm thinking before I drink or before I take the drug. Once I realised that, I could accept that, yeah, in terms of alcohol and drugs, I am completely powerless. I am completely powerless. But in respect to other things in life, yeah, I did seem to have some control, some will, some power over certain things. But when it came down to alcohol and when it came down to drugs, I was screwed. I could not control it. I had tried for years and years to control the amount that I drank, and I failed on almost every attempt. There were a few times when I managed to have 1 or 2, but I'd be laid in bed absolutely wired, itching, not physically sort of scratching, but oh, do you know, I really wanted to get another drink. The times I went into an off license and I just bought the 4 cans that I'd convinced myself were okay to drink, and then I'd go back to said off license and buy another 4 cans, and then I'd go back and buy another 4 cans. And Guy must have thought, bloody hell, it'd have been easier to buy a case of 12 and cheaper, do you know? But it were this every single time. It lied to me, and it convinced me that it was safe for me to drink. And once I believed that lie, I then consumed it. Once I consumed it, I started the allergy. And once I'd started the allergy, I were off, and nobody knew when it were going to stop. So I drank until almost passing out or blacking out or arguing with my wife or arguing with my parents or arguing with people around me. You know, it caused me a hell of a lot of pain. So that's my experience with step 1. I did admit that I was powerless, and I did admit that my life was unmanageable. So from there, once I'd accepted, once I'd understood, I could move on to step 2, and that'll be a completely different video. So I hope somebody gets something from this. It's life-changing stuff, you know. Over the past 4.5 years, the gifts of sobriety that I've received have been unbelievable. You know, I could share lots and lots and lots of things with you that have happened in my life as a result of accepting that I'm powerless, not only over alcohol, but pretty much over a lot more that goes on in this world. And once I can step back from that, life gets a whole lot more peaceful. Life gets a whole lot more serene, and it becomes a joy to live, you know, just because I can step back and just let go. So yeah, I hope, like I say, somebody got something from it. If you're struggling with step 1, put a comment down. Let's have a chat about it, you know. Let's help other people in their journey, because we're all on a journey, you know. Each one of us is just helping the other one walk home, and that's a beautiful way to look at it, isn't it? So thanks for watching, guys. Take care.